This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
I'm Roby Brock. Welcome to this edition of Talk Business and Politics. It is day 98 of the 93rd Arkansas General Assembly. A lot of action at the Capitol today in committees and on the House and the Senate floor. Here's a recap.
The fourth time, still not the charm. House members, for the fourth time in a week, failed to pass the state's Medicaid funding appropriation. It received 72 votes this time, but needs 75 to pass. The measure contains the entire state Medicaid budget, but it also contains the new Our Home Medicaid expansion budget. Some lawmakers either want to scrap the state's Medicaid expansion program or don't support the newly revised version of Arkansas Works. House Bill 1899, which would have required greater disclosure of dark money funding in Supreme Court and Court of Appeals races in Arkansas, was stopped in the House on Monday. After a thorough explanation from the bill's sponsor, Representative Andrew Collins, Democrat of Little Rock, it was opposed by Representative David Ray, Republican of Maumelle. The bill failed, 29 votes for to 50 against. Expect to hear more about this measure in the near future. Finally, a proposed constitutional amendment to allow the state legislature to call itself into special session cleared a Senate panel. Right now, the governor is the only one who can call a special session. The measure now heads to the full Senate and could be one of up to 3 proposed amendments for voters to consider in the 2022 general election. Another proposal to require a 60% vote passage on changes to the Arkansas Constitution has passed the House and could be another possible ballot item in 2022.
Of course, you can keep up with some of the coverage from those committees and that House and Senate floor action on our website at talkbusiness.net. When we come back, what did the governor have to say about relations between the executive and the legislative branch? We'll play some outtakes from our interview this weekend with Governor Asa Hutchinson, and later columnist John Brummett on what's happening with national and state politics and who might be the next Arkansas governor. Stay tuned.
Talk Business and Politics is sponsored in part by Capital Advisors Group and...
You'll find us at the end of a lot of long country roads, covering over 60% of the great state of Arkansas. Our 17 electric distribution cooperatives are working day and night to provide reliable, affordable power to over 500,000 homes, farms, and businesses, just like yours. The Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas, your local energy partners.
They say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. But if you're looking for something more, Walmart has you covered. We provide quality care, no appointment necessary. Whether you're looking for fresh, healthy groceries to fill your prescription, get a flu shot, or pick up your next pair of glasses, we're standing by with in-store health professionals available across the country to offer patient-first, affordable care whenever you need it. Apples, optional.
Well, over the weekend, we played a portion of our recent interview with Governor Asa Hutchinson. We talked a lot about national and state politics. In particular, the governor and I talked about what it's been like between the executive and the legislative branches, this 93rd General Assembly. Here are a few outtakes from that interview. So let's talk about some legislative executive branch friction, as I mentioned earlier here. The legislature is probably going to propose that they can call themselves into legislative session, a special session if they want to. At least they're going to propose that potential amendment. They've restricted your emergency powers. I know you've worked with them on that. We've talked about a couple of pieces of legislation that restrict their following presidential executive orders and this cooperation with the federal government. Was even an effort made to take some of your appointment powers away and share that with the legislature. Is the legislature going too far in trying to take authority away from the executive branch of government?
Well, first of all, let me emphasize that I think we've had a very good relationship. We have a good dialogue. And so, while I disagree with some of the efforts to diminish the executive branch, to lift up the legislative branch. While we have those disagreements, overall we've worked together in a good partnership. Now, I hope that it does not go to the ballot for a vote on a referred constitutional amendment that would allow the legislature to call themselves into session. Historically, we've had a part-time legislature that meets once every 2 years in regular session. Well, this would convert it into really a full-time legislature, and that is, their perception is that the executive branch is very powerful and the legislative branch is not strong enough, and they want to strengthen that. Well, I think you've got to step back a little bit and understand that under our Constitution, the governor has a lot of respect, but structurally, the legislature has a lot of power, particularly with the purse strings. So there's disagreements, but I tell them that there's always natural friction between the executive and the legislative branch, and that's partly designed by our founding fathers. That's the separation of powers, and so we should not be frustrated by that friction. We need to respect each other and work through in a cooperative way on many of these issues. But no, I disagree with the legislature being able to call themselves into session. I think that's and hopefully that will not be one of the amendments that come out. In terms of the emergency powers, we work closely with them, and what came out I think is a fair balance, and you saw that work most recently where I continue the emergency and they affirmed it. And it's good to have legislative support on key initiatives or emergencies. I like legislative support because it strengthens our hand.
You kept the emergency powers intact because a vote failed to stop the emergency powers, though.
Well, which was key.
Right.
They don't have to affirm it. They just, if they want to stop it, they can, but they didn't because the burden was on them. I think that's fine because it's limited to a pandemic. We're not talking about earthquakes. We're not talking about natural disasters in that traditional sense. This is pandemics which are long-lasting, and if it's going to continue that long, we want to make sure that the legislature has support for it.
The session's not over yet, so I will let you reserve the right to address this answer again once the session does end. What's disappointed you the most about this legislative session? Either something you haven't gotten done or something you've had to deal with that you wish you didn't.
Well, I think probably the disappointment would simply be in that we were not able to stay away from so many controversial bills that I think were probably unnecessary. But I don't want to dwell on the negative here. I think it has been a good session. If I look at going back, what could we have done better? I think let's let the dust settle before we actually determine that. Obviously, the veto that was overridden is one that I disagree with substantively, but you have to also remember I vetoed another bill and they sustained it.
Yeah.
And
You're not the first governor that's had a veto overridden.
I won't be the last either.
Last question on the legislature in terms of the session. Are you going to be able to get the Our Home, the Medicaid expansion, funded and through?
That's another great success story, is that we've been able to get the reauthorization for our Medicaid expansion, Our Homes. We converted it to make it fit more perfectly here in an Arkansas environment, a rural state. And we just simply have to get through the broad appropriation bill for Medicaid itself. That's one of the functions of the legislature and function of government is to fund it. So I fully expect that to happen, but when you have a 3/4 vote, sometimes they wait toward the end to do that. So I'm counting on that happening.
That's Governor Asa Hutchinson. You can catch our full interview with the governor at our website at talkbusiness.net. When we come back, columnist John Brummett on the governor, this legislature, and who could be the next governor. Stay tuned. Talk Business and Politics is sponsored in part by Impact Management Group and
we have a large commitment to our solar for good reason. It lowers customers' rates. It's emissions-free.
Entergy Arkansas is the largest provider of solar in the state of Arkansas.
Utility-scale solar is much more economic for customers. We're going to operate it. We're going to maintain it. We're going to focus on it. That's what we do for a living.
We want to continue to find ways to partner with our customers to meet their renewable energy goals.
Customers want this. We want to provide it. So our commitment is for the long term.
Here's to the fearless fight, the comeback, The battle against all odds. For some, it's taking the first step. For others, it's forging a new path. A chance to prove to ourselves what we're really made of. And with the name trusted in insurance for more than 70 years, even a battered spirit can come back stronger. Arkansas Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Live fearless.
Joining me now is John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. And who is your furry friend that you're with?
You can't see, she's down here low. Sophie, the wonderful rescue beagle.
All right.
Lemon drop beagle. I'm just telling you that if there's commotion in the alley during this telecast, you're going to hear a beagle baying that's going to unnerve your entire audience, and we'll just have to start over or just wait to get her outside. She's right here right now, just adoringly looking at her wonderful master. Okay, go ahead.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Let's begin with Governor Asa Hutchinson making some national news on our television program this past week with basically saying he is going to start a political action committee and some sort of political action education group to raise some issues at the federal level and try to influence the U.S. GOP. Are you surprised that that is a route that he is going to take? You've been baiting him to run for president. This might be a future of his foundation.
I heard you tell him that I'd been baiting him to run. I've just been observing what I perceive, which is that he has a clear national interest that will continue after his term limitation here in Arkansas at the end of next year. Not surprised, but it's a good move that validates what we've been seeing, which is that while term limited in Arkansas after next year, and with nothing in Arkansas of a political nature readily available to him that would be appropriate, and with his stint as chairman of the National Governors Association beginning in this summer and extending through the remainder of his term, he intends to move into an undefined role seeking to have influence in national Republican politics. I think his telling you yesterday for the first time that he has these two PACs, one which just makes direct donations, the other one of these 501c4s that's going to make announcements on issues, can actually do advertising as long as it's not advocacy, but educational. I don't know how much money he's going to be able to raise, but that's what he intends to do. He clearly sees himself in a national role. In a way, a politician at that level having a national PAC or two is commonplace. In this case, it shows that clearly our governor is not moving out of politics at the end of his term and has an interest. He told you, we need a national, this is important times. He was saying we got to stop this Biden horror, because he is after all a Republican, but he's saying we've got to do it in a way that moves us away from this divisiveness. In other words, a more moderate, pragmatic path. I've talked to him over the years. He believes presidents are best when they come from governorships because they have understood how to work with real problems in a practical way. So that's what it indicates, and it's interesting. And he's been given 2 or 3 opportunities, including by you, to say, among your national interests is not the presidency. You're not thinking of running for that, are you? He will not say that. I think that's a long shot prospect, but it's one he's keeping in mind, and he wants to. And not to ramble, but there aren't many people out there with the independence and the nerve to risk the wrath of Donald Trump and to take him on. And to his everlasting credit, I don't care what my liberal critics say, Asa Hutchinson is to be praised for moving on an independent path that says we need to get past Trump and he needs not to be our leader or our nominee. And to veto that transgender bill and go on Meet the Press and say, the way to impose or have influence in terms of moral, religious views is not necessarily or always or ever to use the instrument of law. It's to use matters of influence based on your behavior and your beliefs outside the instrument of law. Believe that? A Republican willing to say that on Meet the Press, to sort of step away from this so-called white Christian nationalism that has become the very foundation of the Republican Party. All of that is just interesting. I'm finding Asa interesting to watch these days, and I enjoyed. I watched every minute of your nearly half-hour interview with him.
Well, I appreciate you working your way through that. And I also think, too, one of the things that kind of surprised me, he has obviously not been afraid to stand up to Trump, who is, intimidating at the national and the state level right now, even at the local level here in Arkansas. He said a few more forceful things, again, in his diplomatic and tactful way, that is basically Trump's not the de facto head of the Republican Party. And we have a lot of voices, and we need some more voices. I find that a little bit refreshing because we do not hear that very often in Republican circles.
Who else is saying it? Mitch McConnell started to, and has been trying to wiggle out of that, or said it right after the impeachment vote, but paid a price, I think. You got your Romneys and Collinses, but they're mostly working on maybe trying to do some bipartisan stuff with Joe Manchin, and that the White House will go for on policy. So no, there's a vacancy there for somebody who is willing in the national level to say, let's get past Trump. Let's get over Trump. Let's move out of his destructive shadow. And right now it's Asa Hutchinson, seems to me. That's who I'm seeing do it.
Yeah. All right. We'll keep our eye on that. Now, the governor also did speak, too, about what's going on in this legislative session, said he did not feel that he could really have halted or slowed down or stopped some of the culture wars that we've seen in this legislative session. And also, I think he seemed to indicate some warnings, kind of a Eisenhower military industrial complex warning towards the legislative encroachment of the executive branch. There, if I could kind of use a little bit of a tortured analogy. I found some of his comments about what's going on in state politics interesting as well.
I believe that's the first time I've heard him say, though I'm not surprised they said it. He may have said it before. Really, a governor's veto ought to be worth more than overriding with a simple majority vote. He said that to you outright. Of course he thought that. To be overridden by simple majority makes his opinion on policy making on matters of dispute with the legislature no more important than yours or mine. The basic majority can undo it. There ought to be some premium placed on it, and in most states it's 60 or 67%. At the national level, it's 2/3, I think. So I was interested in that. I thought he was fairly candid. He's always on the balance beam. I watch him, and I've watched politics a long time, and I wrote a whole book about Bill Clinton titled High Wire. That's where he always is. Asa Hutchinson is sort of there too. And I call it a balance beam. He's always trying to not say a destructive thing, but to say something that's more subtle. He has told me many times for pieces I've done for your annual magazine, I don't like, philosophy aside, I don't like divisive bills that meet no direct need. They just distract from the session, cause damage to the general mood of the session. I don't like them. He's been able to keep those at bay in the past. This time there obviously was no chance. And there are more than 2 or 3 bills I think that he doesn't want to sign. But there's, you pick your fights and you veto the ones and sit tight for the next day's override. Only when you really feel the spirit move you. Yeah. So, and that's pretty obvious too.
Yeah, as he said, he wasn't the first. He won't be the last governor to have a veto over.
Somebody ought to put a bill in there to put an amendment out, a public initiative. The legislature's not going to do it, to raise the number of votes to override. And the legislature is not just. This legislature is not just showing that it's learned that it can have more power and it won't. It's threatening to disturb the balance of power. It wants to be able to call itself into session, which, as he said, makes our legislature a full-time session, subject to its own call anytime that it wants. A governor, any governor, after dealing with these guys and gals for 90, 100 days in the kind of pressure cooker that these sessions are, needs some time to to exercise the executive branch to implement the laws and try to deal with the damage that's been done. The prospect that the Speaker and the President pro tem could call themselves back at any moment is dire for a governor, and I think dire for the state.
Let's talk about who may at least be the front runners for succeeding Asa Hutchinson. Last week, we got some campaign finance reports were made public. Leslie Rutledge has raised a little over $1.2 million for the full cycle, but only about $200,000 for the primary in this last go round here. Sarah Huckabee Sanders raised $4.8 million, a staggering amount of money. I mean, clearly she is the front runner in this governor's race.
You think? Yeah. You've not done a poll, I don't believe, on her in the Republican primary. I'm sure you will. And I haven't seen any other published polls, but there have been tons of polls that people have been telling me, and I don't write about all of them, but she's over 60% in the primary and in a general election. I mean, she is Trump on the ballot. She is a surrogate for Trump. Indeed, a puppet of Trump, and what she did, she decided, I'm going to announce, and I'm going to use the Trump network, and I'm going to go to Texas with Pompeo. I'm going to go down to Mar-a-Lago with Trump, and I'm going to play all those Trump cards, and I'm going to get the Trump people to give me a big number. I'm going to shock and awe. And Tim Griffin dropped out already, and she's thinking she can just overwhelm. And I think she's doing it. And now, a lot of Arkansas, most of this money was out of state, nearly 2/3 of it was from out of state. But now that she's produced this big number and she has this aura of invincibility, which is actual invincibility, I think, the people in Arkansas who need to ante up to cover their backsides or to make a safe investment in who the next governor is going to be, she's going to be able to pour that money in. I mean, I just think it's overpowering. I got a column coming tomorrow, Wednesday, I forget which day I wrote it for, saying the big battle royal that we had expected in the governor's race for 2022 seems almost preemptively concluded. Now, something could change. I can't imagine what, but this is starting to look like a Trump puppet's coronation, and it's just, this is a Trump state. And she is right next to Trump, and she's running, continues to run. People are sending me copies of mailings, fundraising mailings. Sign her petition to stop the Biden agenda, and send her $1,000. That's that message has nothing to do with day-to-day administration of Arkansas government. It's a bogus message, but it's politically effective. She is, after all, a full-time political operative by training. And she's going to produce the big number will beget more big numbers in terms of her campaign treasury.
All right, so to wrap it all up, we've got a future president in Asa Hutchinson, a future governor in Sarah Huckabee, and a future full-time legislature. Is that our conclusion today?
Oh dear, you didn't have to put it all together in such effective, dire terms. But no, Asa's not. Asa's going to play in national politics. I don't think he's a future president. Sarah, yeah, future governor. And the legislature, I think, will give us a chance to vote to give them the ability to call themselves into session. And you never know what the people of Arkansas are going to do. They do strange things on constitutional amendments, ballot referrals. Might vote that one down. I stand in a position to endorse it or oppose it, whichever would do it the most harm.
All right. He's John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Thank you, my friend, as always.
Thank you, buddy. Next time. Bye.
That is all for this edition of Talk Business and Politics. I'm Roby Brock. Thanks for tuning in.